Hello and welcome back to Bible, Brats, and Brew. We're your hosts, Brandon and Greg. In today's episode, we're going to go over Exodus chapter 19 and chapter 20. We're going to look at Moses on Sinai, how the Lord visits Sinai, and then we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the Ten Commandments. And of course, on part 2, we're going to give you our thoughts on the Brats and Brew that we ate and drank as well. So thank you again for joining with Brandon and myself on Bible, Brats, and Brew. Hey Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Just kind of a lazy Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, it's a good Sunday afternoon, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm excited. We haven't done one of these in a little while.
No.
Greg, you were on a vacation to an exotic land.
Alaska, yep.
And what was that like?
I tell you what, it was just gorgeous. It was beautiful. Yeah, there's nothing like that. As far as what we can visit here in the U.S., the weather wasn't bad. It wasn't cold, not compared to what we get here in North Dakota, but
yeah, it's all about that wind chill.
Right, it is. But it was damp. It didn't rain real hard. It was misty, but I tell you what, great food up there. I really enjoyed that. But most important, I tell you what, I got a moment to just reflect on the creation account and just see, the beauty of nature. It was phenomenal, unreal.
Oh, that's exciting. I thought when you said the best moment was when you found gold.
Well, that was pretty cool too. And the crab. That was great too.
Yeah. I'm jealous of all the seafood. North Dakota, famously not near any ocean.
Nope.
pretty famously. And so that seafood's got to be been real great.
Oh, it was great. Nothing compares.
Yeah. Well, we may not have anything that's comparable as Alaskan seafood, but we're going to be talking about some brats and some brew.
Yes.
So, what are the brats?
So, the brats that we had today, they were unique. Dill pickle brats by Four Brothers Smokehouse.
Yeah. So, if you're a pickle fan, that might be interesting. We'll have to wait until hear our thoughts, but I gotta say, I entered in skeptical because I'm not the biggest pickle guy.
No, I like pickle a lot too, but I thought it was going to be weird. But I'll give my thought later.
Yeah, we won't give our thoughts. What are you drinking?
So this is by Founders. It's called Breakfast Stout. It's a roasted coffee, which is supposed to be sweet and decadent. So I'll give my thoughts later on it.
You said it was made of oatmeal?
Yeah, it has oatmeal.
I like oatmeal. But my favorite oatmeal is the maple flavor, and that actually reminds me of my...
What you got there, Bren?
I got a Sprecher. Well, now I had a Sprecher before.
Yep.
It was really, really good. I think I had it on the episode we talked about. Last time there was a mountain involved, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're returning to Sprecher just like we're returning to the mountain.
Yes.
This is not a regular Sprecher. This is a maple root beer flavored. So
Ooh.
I'm interested to see how much this maple is going to be featured in this root beer.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that.
So you're going to get that little pop.
I'll open it up. I actually cracked it to see if I needed to twist off, so all the sound might be gone. Oh yeah, no sound.
This is making you feel a bit. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's a second life in it. But yeah, I'm excited for these brews, but I'm also excited to talk about Exodus. We haven't got to share and read together, so we are going to be picking up right at 19. And we're going to see Moses at the mountain again. And so we'll read 1 through 17. We'll talk about it. And then we'll move on pretty quickly to the 10 Commandments. Because there's a lot of content. Even though there's only 10, there's not a lot of time to talk about each one. And they're pretty important.
They are. Absolutely. Well, do you want to start us off here, Brandon?
You tricked me into reading. All right, let's go. All right, verse 1, chapter 19. In the 3rd month, after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the very day that they came into the wilderness of Sinai. When they set out from that location, they came to the wilderness of Sinai, and they camped in the wilderness. And there Israel camped in front of the mountain. And Moses went up to the God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel, You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words from which you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So Moses came and called of the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him. So I'm actually going to pause there. I was going to read until 17 and then talk about the whole thing, but I actually think it's probably pretty good to stop there and talk about it because there is some meaty stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that I thought was really interesting when I was reading the commentary, because I probably didn't notice it right away, was that in verse 3, when God is referring to the Israelites, he uses two words, two phrases. He uses the house of Jacob and the sons of Israel. Yes. So for those that are not familiar, Jacob was like his original name. It actually is in reference to the fact that he is a deceiver, that he grasped Esau's heel, and that was a sign of being a deceiver, and that he manipulated his family. And Jacob's is kind of represented like his old life. But then he kind of hit rock bottom where he had nothing left. He was about to meet his brother that he had betrayed, and he was worried that the army that his brother had was going to destroy him and his whole family. Yeah. And so he was kind of at rock bottom, and he was wrestling with God, and he was wrestling with himself and wrestling with his sin and wrestling with what his nature is. And when God was wrestling with him, he demonstrated his superiority. He touched him on that weakened thigh and demonstrated his total power over Israel. But Israel, Jacob didn't give up, and he said, "Please bless me." That represents like kind of like this rock bottom. He's turning to God when he has nothing else he can depend on. Right. And that's where he got this new name of Israel. And so that name change represented this change in Israel and Jacob from all of this former nature and lifestyle to this new dependence on God. Yeah. And so this name change is being referenced here because he's referring to them both as the house of Jacob, but then as the son of Israel. And that meant to represent that the Israelites are supposed to experience that change as well, that they are coming from this position of slavery, that they're coming from this position of being at rock bottom, and they're now meant to turn to God in desperation, just like Israel turned to God in desperation. Right. And so I think that there's a clear parallel in it. This reference to Jacob and Israel all together in that same line is he's encouraging them. You need to make that transition. And it details a little bit of the covenant that you are to fully obey me. And as a result, two things are going to happen. So I wanted to talk about those two things because I think that they're really meaty. Now, the first thing I want to say is I'm not the biggest fan of how they translated my own possession. So it says in verse 5, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession. The translation I read used my own treasured possession. So the word for it, to which I am not going to be able to pronounce, is in the Hebrew. It's referring to like the king's treasure, like the most valuable thing a king has. This is like the apex of the treasury. This is something that is important. This is valuable. This isn't just like a possession you own. Like I own a bunch of junk, and I forget some of the things I own. This is not the type of possession that's being referred to here. This is like, what is your most treasured possession? What is something that is deeply valuable to you? And that is what is being referred to. That we're not like the junk that's in the junk drawer or the things that we bought on sale at a garage sale. We are things that God deeply and fundamentally treasures and desires to have. Right. And so when Israel is entering into that covenant of I will obey you, I will be in relationship with you, Israel is becoming that treasured object. And I think that's really amazing in that these failed people that have resisted God at every step of the way, that have demonstrated their lack of trust so far almost every step of the way, God is desiring of them, and he's passionate about having them in his life and being in their lives. And that this treasured possession phrase, I think, is kind of blew me away. Right. Well, and that's such a good point. Well, here I'm looking right now in the Tanakh, which is
translated from Hebrew into English. And it's so important to look at that because, I don't like how they translated that either. But, in verse 5, now then, if you obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples. Yeah. So I think that's a good point.
A better translation of what the Hebrew word means.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point to bring up because, some of these translations, they get to be a little, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, it's not a bad translation. It didn't capture the essence of that word as well as it could have. So comparing different English translations,
it's hard.
Is valuable to I think for an everyday person. Because most people can't be expected to know Hebrew. Like I don't hear Hebrew, so
I know very little.
But what are your thoughts on what we read so far? So far,
I guess what we really see too is the deep passion and desire that God has to communicate to His creation or His people to continue in fulfilling His vision of what is my mission, overall mission. What is it? It's not to follow the will of man, but it's to follow the will of God. And for an individual to really want to participate in doing that, you have to see yourself and know your identity in Christ, which means you understand that you are a treasured possession, like you said, Brandon. And I think that's why we really need to look at that, a lot more even of, who are we as people in Christ? We are treasured possessions. We are. It's so we can fulfill the mission and vision of God here on earth. So I really see that going through this, there's tension in here, sure. But there's also redemption in this, but that's getting into, the identity of being a treasured possession.
And so the second description in verse 6. So when entering into this covenant, they're going to be this treasured possession of God. It also says, "And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." And so those are really interesting ideas. And so I was reading the commentary, and they had a lot of thoughts. A lot of people have had a lot of thoughts about that. But in conclusion of some of the conclusions they came up with was that they're meant to have, Israelites are meant to have both a royal and a priestly aspect to them. And it's a callback to the Garden of Eden where God instituted Adam and Eve to rule over the things of the creation. They are meant to facilitate growth and to expand and to, in harmony with nature and with creation, to develop it and to be the facilitators and having this priestly function of representing God and entering into His presence, as well as this royal feature of ruling over things on His behalf and with Him. And so the Garden of Eden invited humanity to share with God and live with God and work with God in such a powerful way. And because of the fall, a lot of that was taken away and was stripped. We still represent, we still have our images of God, but these were images that are murky, that are tainted by our own selfish desire to do things opposed to God instead of with God.
Right.
And so this is enter into this covenant. You'll be treasured by me, and you will we will restore and begin to restore what humanity was meant to be, and that it was having this priestly function, this royal function of being with God. And so it's restoring parts of the Garden of Eden in this kind of redemptive, progressive sort of way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we start at verse 8 here?
Yeah, you can go ahead and read.
Okay.
I tricked you into reading most of it now.
That's all right. And just so everybody knows, we're reading from the NASB as well right now. So verse 8, and all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, I shall come to you in a thick cloud, in order that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe in you forever. Then Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. The Lord also said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people, and you shall set bounds for the people around, saying, beware that you do not go up to the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. So it came about on the third day, when it was morning, that there were thunder and lightning flashes, and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud trumpet sound, so that all people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain.
All right, so I definitely wanted us to read that because I think it really paints the scene of the fact that God presence. I think it's something that we often take advantage of and take for granted. The fact that God is appearing before them and speaking before them, it's accompanied by these mighty signs that demonstrate that, one, Moses is in fact a prophet that is communicating God's words, but it's also just like this magnificent signs that say that God is magnificent, and the people have to prepare themselves to experience that. They have to clean themselves, take a bath. They have to be ritually clean. In not using the Levitical code in that hasn't been given yet, but they, in their religious worldview and culture, they understand the idea of this ritual cleanliness, and so they need to be clean. They need to separate themselves from others sexually, and that they needed to set aside themselves for God in this 3 days of preparation. And I think it's a reminder of God's power and God's magnificentness that we shouldn't take for granted his nature and the fact that he is so mighty, and that there's a holiness that we can't forget, that the fear of the Lord is not a bad thing, but it's recognizing our place before God in a manner of worship.
Absolutely. It really is a position of awe and marvel.
Yeah.
Just knowing what he's done, and that position of awe, it keeps the eyes of your heart.
Yeah. And so, we don't have to take a bath and prepare ourselves 3 days in advance of going to church. Right. I think a lesson could be learned in that, like, sometimes we need to like prepare ourselves for God and for approaching God, and shouldn't do it so lightly. Right. I think that's a valuable lesson. But continuing on,
super valuable.
Just summarizing 18 to 25. Essentially, Moses goes down and goes up the mountain, and he has to go down immediately and tell people they can't come up. Then he goes up with Aaron. So there's a little bit of walking involved for poor Moses there. And it says here the top of the mountain, so he had to climb the whole thing up and down a few times.
So let me ask you this real quick: what did you think if you had to walk up a mountain?
I've said it before. I work as a postal employee, a city carrier. So I walk about
a lot.
12 miles a day is about what I've been averaging. One day I got up to 15. And it's a lot of walking. But the nice thing is North Dakota is flat. And so I was doing a lot of walking horizontally. I hate vertical. I hate hiking. I get winded. I want to sit down. Like, the view is nice, but you know what? Pictures are also nice, and photos are also nice. And so, you know what? I would have been too tired to go up this mountain.
So, this reminds me of a story. And since we have a little extra time right now, what you were just explaining and thinking about this mountain and everyone having, Moses having to climb up it. And it brings me back to, do you remember when you and me, and just so everybody knows, I'm married to Brandon's sister, Samantha. We all took a trip out to Idaho for a wedding. And do you remember when we went to that botanical garden to see all these flowers and trees? And, this is a perfect image of this. We go to that little hill, and Sam looks at me, and her eyes just get big. She's like, no, I ain't going to do it. And then you start walking up the hill. And I'm like, oh, we're going up this hill. And so I had to encourage her to get up. And by the time we're up there, she goes, I'm dying. Nope, I'm done.
There was a bench up there. It was fine.
I know, but it just reminded me of that.
The funny thing is, like, it was a fairly little hill. Like, this is not like a mountain. This is
a little hill.
Yeah, this is...
But it reminded me of that,
yeah.
It was a good time.
No, yeah, holy hiking trip for Moses. He got his calories in. And so now we kind of hit 20, and so here we're gonna have the 10 Commandments, and we'll just go through them one at a time, and that's probably going to take us the rest of the time for this part 1 and part 2. So there's an introductory sentence, 2 verses. Then God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." And so he kind of sets this up as a reminder of who I am to you, is that I have freed you from this old life, this oppressive sin, this oppressive Pharaoh that is betraying you and are tyrants over you. And so you have this new chance of this new life with me in service to me. And so there's this old life, new life kind of dynamic and reminding them where they came from. And so in the 10 Commandments, it doesn't talk a lot about it, but the next podcast episodes we'll do cover the kind of the penal codes that are included in 21 through 24. And a lot of those codes deal with slavery. And the fact that they are coming from they just came from an oppressive slavery is meant to impact their kind of like worldview of how they treat slaves. And so we'll talk about that in the next podcast. But this phrase is definitely there for a reason, to remind them of where they're at. So we'll go ahead and we'll say one of the commandments, and then we'll talk about it. So the very first one we'll find in verse 3: "You shall have no other gods before me." Nice and simple.
Yep. Take away idolatry from the heart. Take it out.
Yeah. So this is an interesting that there is, like, all of their neighbors around them are going to be polytheistic. They have pantheon. So the Egyptians have a very detailed pantheon of greater gods and lesser gods. The land that they're going into, that they're going to be tempted to worship Baal and Marduk. And so there's all of these different deities and these pantheons. And in this religious system, the desire is that you want to manipulate the gods to get them to do things you want. And the gods are trying to manipulate you to get them what they want. And so in the ancient Near Eastern neighbors, the gods created people to be their servants. They were lazy. They didn't want to make their own food. And so they were told, like, let's make these humans so that these humans can make food for us. And then when they burn it in offerings, we'll inhale all of the smoke of the food that will transfer to us. And that was a core part of their philosophy and their theology. Very different to God creating these people to love them and to experience them. And so they are meant to not engage with this idolatry, to not engage with these other deities that are a fundamentally manipulative and false way of thinking and way of life. And so God's not going to tolerate any of that. So in the Bible, we'll find that a lot of Israelites are going to be worshiping God. But in addition to worshiping God, they're also going to be worshiping other gods. And that is called henotheism. Henotheism, in that there's worship of only one deity, but they believe that there are other deities that exist. And so a lot of the Israelites are henotheistic in the Bible, and God condemns that you're not supposed to worship any other gods. They are made of wood. They are non-entities, and He's not going to tolerate any of that, because God is jealous and zealous for His people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing too is that really reflects Mammon coming into the New Testament as well. So let's see. You all right with going to verse 4 now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the water under the earth. Again, idolatry.
Yep. Let's read verse 5 because it's attached to it in 6.
You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments.
Yeah, so people might think, like, well, is this kind of like the same as the first commandment? And it's connected. But it fundamentally has like a distinction in that these worshiping other gods is different than idols, because they could have an idol of Yahweh, for example, they're not supposed to do. And we see that in the Old Testament, that God condemns that he's not supposed to have an image of him presented, because that is not him. He is far above the things of this earth, and that there shouldn't be this object that they worship. Because when it comes to these idols had a spiritual function, that wood or that stone or that gold represented that deity, but also was that deity. That deity mystically was embodied by that gold. And so when you bow down to that idol, you were bowing down to that God.
Right.
And so they're not supposed to have any of this idolatry. They're not supposed to have anything that is in addition to worshiping the one true God. And so a couple things it says there, I think, that are interesting is that when you read the line, jealous God, in English, the word jealousy has like negative connotations.
Right.
That's wrong. This is where the translation you were reading just now actually has a word that I like a lot more, because that word that's being used for jealous, I think, is quana in the Hebrew, and it means passion. Like a better word in English would be zealous instead of jealous. That God is passionate for his people, that he's passionate and he deeply cares about. And so God deeply cares about you and doesn't want to share or split your attention, because that he is a passionate God and a zealous God. So
yeah, let me read that real quick on verse 5 from the Tanakh. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, and am an impassioned God, visiting the guilt of the parents upon the children, upon the third, and upon the fourth generation of those who reject me. So yeah, impassioned. It's showing a positive thing about God being jealous. It means he cares. Yeah. It means he loves us, right?
Yeah, and a lot of sermons, the preacher or the pastor will say well, it means jealous, a righteous jealousness between a man and a wife.
Right.
And I think that's a good explanation, but I do wish that they just kind of use the word impassioned or zealous instead.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Because I think that doesn't require all that explanation.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I think
I do want to talk about the third and fourth generation, but we don't have time. We have to give in part 2.
I know, that's what I was just trying to think of. So, I tell you what, I think we save that for the next episode here, and I just hope everybody joins us in on part 2, because part 2 is going to be great.
We've only covered 1.5 commandments.
Yeah,
we got 9.5 to go.
We got 9.5 to go. Yep, just like Brandon said. So, join us here on part 2. So, both Brandon and I, we thank you so much for joining us on part 1 of venturing through Exodus 19 and 20. Join us on part 2, because you're not going to want to miss our thoughts on the brats and the brew. Some good stuff going on too. There's pickles involved, but it's not as good as the meat that we're consuming in the scriptures, is it?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I thought you were giving your opinion.
No, I went that way. We're here for the meat of the scripture, not the brat, even though that's a good thing too. So we look forward to seeing you on part 2 with Brandon and Greg on Bible, Brats, and Brew.